Welcome to the Faster Podcast by FLO Cycling, the podcast where we talk about anything and everything that makes you faster on your bike. This is episode 36, and today we have Christa Orrechio from The Whole Journey joining us on the show. During this episode, we'll discuss the gut microbiome and its critical role in our health and performance as athletes. Listen to this episode to learn how improving the health of your gut microbiome can help you become a healthier, faster cyclist. This is Chris with a special message. After dedicating my full time to FLO Cycling for the better part of a decade, I've decided to move on from the day-to-day responsibilities in the company. I will still be an owner of FLO and will help make significant brand decisions. However, I will not be answering emails, contributing to forums, producing the Faster podcast, or doing the many other things people have come to associate me with over the years. John will be running the day-to-day moving forward, and I know he will take great care of everyone. Creating and running FLO Cycling has been one of the best experiences of my life. 10 years ago, John and I were working all hours of the night to build FLO Cycling in the one-car garage of our condo after coming home from our full-time jobs. As I record this today, we have sold tens of thousands of bicycle wheels to more than 70 countries around the world and donated more than 2,000 bicycles to children in need. While hard work has definitely played a part in our success, I am fully aware that it has been the support of every single person who has contributed to FLO that has made our dream come true. And for that, I am truly grateful. Thank you for the support over the years. All right, Christa Orrechio, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I am doing great, Chris. How are you?
I'm doing very, very good. I'm happy to have you on the show, I have to say. We had Stacy Sims on our show probably a year ago now, and she is a nutrition expert who's worked with athletes in the Tour de France and all over the world.
Wow.
And during that episode, she brought up the topic of gut microbiome and how important it is to general health and athletes. So I went on a mission to try and find a gut microbiome specialist, and it's a very hard person to find. I've read several books on the topic now. I wrote most of the authors, and they were not interested in being on the show or didn't even reply. So I kept looking and looking and looking, and then I went to the park by my house one day, and we bumped into each other, and I'm from Canada, and I talk to everyone about anything, and I found out that you are a gut microbiome specialist, and I coerced you into coming on this show. Oh. So it's very cool to have you on, and we're very excited to talk about this subject because it's fascinating. So,
it is. It's the nexus of human health. So that was certainly a fated day at the dog park. Yes,
there you go. Okay, so we're going to get into your background a little bit near the end of the show, but I think what we should just start with is, how about we just start with some of the basics? And I think one of the first things that we should clarify on the show is, what is the gut microbiome? So can you start with telling us what that is?
Of course. So the gut microbiome is the collective genetic material of everybody, all the bugs, good, bad, and indifferent, that live within the small intestine. And so it's really important because it's an entire community. So if you want to relate a microbiome, just think about it like a little world, right? And you've got, and it's just a community. You've got good guys, you've got bad guys, you've got all of different variants of them. And then you also have the environment that you have to take into place. So the microbiome is, like I said, really one of the primary foundations of human health.
Okay, excellent. Okay, and what function does it play in our body? So that's what it is, but what does it actually do for us?
It does pretty much everything. So if you can get, so I have to kind of lay the foundation here, Chris, in that
Sure.
we should have 80%, most humans should have 80 to 85% good bugs within their gut. and 15% bad bugs, if you will, because that's just keeping you strong and keeping the immune system challenged to know, hey, what to let in and what to export out, right?
Okay.
And so the problem that has happened is that most of society, and I know we're going to get into how did this happen, but most of our society, and I've been doing this now for 15 years, and I have taken over 10,000 people through gut microbiome rejuvenation, and most of our society has that ratio flipped. So they're living with 85% bad bugs and 15% good bugs. And so now what's happening is the gut microbiome is going to communicate to all the other microbiomes in the body, including the skin, the sinuses, the oral microbiome in the mouth, the throat, the genitals, and the lungs. And so now people are really kind of sicker than they've ever been because they don't have that foundation of the gut microbiome. So whatever your genetic weak spot is, you're going to get that. Like, so you maybe get bronchitis every time you get sick. Maybe you get yeast infections every time, or, you get eczema or psoriasis. And so the gut microbiome plays this foundational role, and it links up with the immune system and communicates with the immune system the genetic code for how to run the other 6 microbiomes. So it's just so vitally important. I know we're going to get into the gut-brain connection. There's so many connections in mood and brain function and mental health with the microbiome, which is really what makes it kind of a catch-all for the human body.
Interesting. I didn't realize there were other microbiomes outside of the gut microbiome. So they're on your skin, they're on your genitals, they're on your sinuses, all over the body.
Yeah, so a microbiome, it just means like a little world of bacteria, right? And so wherever that is, and that's, we are more bacterial, much more bacterial than we are human, right? We have 10 times the amount of bacterial cells in the human body than we do human cells. And so we best make peace with our bacteria in all these other microbiomes.
Okay. Now, just before we get into a couple more questions, you said there are good bacteria and bad bacteria. How do you define good versus bad?
Yeah, so the good bugs, they're called symbiotic bacteria, and these are the do-gooders of the bacteria kingdom. And just like you think of, a pillar of your community, they're going in, they're cleaning up, they're doing repair, they're helping maintain gut health. But, as a society, we're often lacking a lot of these symbiotic bugs because we've killed them off inadvertently with excessive antibiotic use. Our food supplies hit the genetically modified foods are at an all-time high. Sugar, alcohol, stress, that kills the good bugs. And then that allows these pathogenic or bad bugs, the second class of bugs, if you will, they would be like the criminals, right, of the microbiome society, but their work has a purpose. It challenges, it strengthens the immune system, and it ultimately makes it stronger. But the problem is we have really an unhealthy amount of these bad bugs as a result of everything from conception to now. Like your gut health, your health you're experiencing right now is not a reflection of right now. It's a reflection of your entire existence from the time you were in the womb.
Wow. Okay.
There's one more though. Let me just tell you the third type, because it's so important. These third type of bacteria, nobody talks about, but they're so important, and they're called commensal bugs, commensal bacteria. And scientists might say, oh, well, those are neutral bacteria. But in my world, if you're in there and you're taking up real estate, you had better contribute, right? So there are no neutral bugs. Commensal bacteria, this gives us a lot of leeway to help people get healthier faster because they're neutral, so to speak, but I call them the impressionable teenagers of the bacteria kingdom. So depending on the influence, the overarching influence in the gut and the influence you exert over them, they can assist the good bugs. And if you don't do anything to help them, they're going to go and assist the bad bugs.
Wow. Okay, that's fascinating.
Yeah, it totally is.
So my next question was, do we all have the same microbiome? But I know the answer to that now based on what you're saying. So let's start with this then. Are we all born with the same or similar microbiomes, or are we born with different types of microbiomes?
No, just like we're all born with different fingerprints, we are all born with radically different microbiomes, depending on the microbiome of mom and dad when the sperm and the egg came together. Wow. Your microbiome, this is so mind-blowing to most people, Chris, your microbiome starts getting developed 90 days before you are even conceived.
Wow.
And then when you conceive, then the sperm and the egg come together. And this starts the microbiome. And then how mom takes care of herself in pregnancy and the level of health. Like I wrote a book on fertility and the microbiome's huge. I really like parents to do a 90-day preconception cleanse, build, and detox for this reason. And so then you want to go into it healthy. And then depending on what type of foods you're eating in pregnancy, your microbiome is literally changing with every bite. And then, of course, the nature of the delivery. And if you need antibiotics, if it's vaginal versus C-section, and then I know you're asking about breastfeeding, and so there's myriad factors involved in this intricate development of a human microbiome, gut microbiome.
Interesting. So there's bacteria even on the level of sperm and egg.
It's this we're talking, there's not necessarily bacteria on the sperm and egg per se, but there's a genetic code that's coming in when on the sperm and egg when they come together. So it's amazing. This is the field of epigenetics where parents, like epigenetics are the on-off switches of our genetic expression. And so if parents really do this microbiome build before coming together, by the time they connect and join that sperm and the egg, you give your baby, not just your baby, but grandbabies, the option to basically duct tape down the genes for a lot of different diseases that we think, oh, my mom had this, my grandma had this, my great-grandma, so I'm definitely going to get it too, right? That's where we have a lot of leeway in this field of epigenetics.
That is fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, it's like this is like one of the most interesting topics for every human because we have no idea how much power and control we have over our health on a generational perspective.
Wow. Okay. So you touched a little bit on vaginal versus C-section, breastfeeding versus bottle fed. How does our microbiome develop as we age?
Our microbiome it's like the ocean, right? It is constantly shifting based upon our environmental factors, based upon what we're exposed to, the health of the host, so to speak. Stress, right? Stress really affects the microbiome. And I know we're going to get into leaky gut. And everything that you eat, it's constantly shifting and changing. And now this kind of really we all have to take into account our childhood. Like I wouldn't be in this field if I wasn't sick. And I affectionately say I was raised on pizza, pasta, and antibiotics because my dad was in the pharmaceutical industry for 42 years. So it's like we sneezed, he doesn't give you a tissue, he was giving us antibiotics, right? So I had horrendous gut health and hormonal health and really had to rejuvenate my health. I mean, I would have 2-3 autoimmune diseases now if I didn't find this field. So you have to look at how you were raised and look at your immune expression because kids basically are born with the most vulnerable immune system and that's why they're little petri dishes and they get sick all the time. And if we're constantly giving them antibiotics and antivirals and things to suppress their immune system to take away these fevers and we're just treating the symptoms, the immune system is never going to kick into this antibody production mode and create this self-sustaining mechanism. So it's something to look for of, okay, well, what was your childhood health like and how many times have you been on antibiotics? And you've got to look at certain things. Did you have chicken pox, right? How many viruses have you had? Because viruses, they don't leave the body, so to speak, like bacteria does. They're either dormant or they're active. And when there's too many viruses and the stress comes and they're too active, they're a pathogen that is going to be gateway to other pathogens coming in. And so you've got to just really take a broad strokes. Did you go on a trip to Mexico and come back with Montezuma's Revenge? Well, hey, then you've had Giardia. Like you've got to look of, okay, that one time you had mono in college, right? Well, now you've got the cytomegalovirus in your system, an Epstein-Barr virus in your system. Sorry, chickenpox is cytomegalo, and a lot of people have Epstein-Barr virus, and they may or may not know it. And so the idea is to start to really work to create balance, get these viruses back locked inside the cells, and just shift the environmental terrain to make it as supportive to human health as possible.
Wow. Okay. So since you've written a book on fertility and babies, I'm assuming, can you tell us what is ideal, vaginal versus C-section and breastfeeding versus bottle fed? I think I know the answer to that, but
yeah,
let's hear it
everybody
from
knows
you.
the answer to that. So vaginal is ideal and breastfeeding is ideal. I don't want to shame anyone who has had C-sections or bottle fed because you can still have a very healthy microbiome. I think the New York Times, I think it was last year, they're finally catching up in the mainstream, which is cool, is they put out an article, the bacteria that babies need. And so there is a very important strain of bacteria that babies need called B. infantis. And they get that through what's called the vaginal gulp when they're coming out the vaginal tract.
Okay.
And B. infantis becomes the dominant phylum of bacteria for the baby and then instructs all the other bacteria, right? So it's that important in this developing immune system. And if you have a C-section, you're missing out on B. infantis, but there are amazing products out there. There are amazing baby formulas out there that probiotic formulas, or you can put a drop in a bottle or a drop on the nipple that you can recolonize the baby's gut. And the same thing, they're amazing formulas. If you breastfeeding, is not the easiest thing in the world. It's often challenging for a lot of women. And so obviously it's going to be best. Your baby really needs that colostrum as soon as it's born. That's going to be the most important part of breastfeeding, and that's just in the first couple of days. So that's something to really shoot and aim for. And then if you can breastfeed for a year, you're slashing your own lifetime chances of cancer by 75%.
Wow.
By doing that. And obviously giving the baby all of these antibodies, your antibodies, and helping this immune system learn. And but if you can't breastfeed, then you don't beat yourself up about it. You just get a top quality formula and you work with some minor strains of probiotics. And I could go further into that newborn care, but that's kind of the synopsis there.
Okay, perfect. I think that's good for the show, and maybe that's something we can talk about at a later time. But that is so crazy how that works. Okay, so we've talked, now that we know that your microbiome can be better or be worse, and we can affect it. What are some things that have a negative effect on our microbiome?
So antibiotics, they have saved so many lives, but in the 110 million prescriptions that we prescribe in the United States annually, that was from 2018, and it's probably more now, 55 million, half, are unnecessary. They're just prescribing antibiotics for viruses that they don't work. And you really should not wipe out your good gut bacteria, because what happens is they're wiping out. It's just like a war. Like, I really relate the microbiome to open warfare. And if you're going to go in there with antibiotics, it's like throwing a bomb in there. And you know what happens, Chris? Just like in war, innocent civilians get hurt.
Exactly.
And the land gets damaged. So this is where leaky gut, the lining of the intestine, starts to create tiny little perforations that are really compromising human health. So while I'm not against antibiotics, they just have to be used sparingly and appropriately. I think that's probably the number one. And then what's happened to the industrialization of our food supply with factory farms is awful, because we started mass producing and mass farming, and that's not food. It's not natural. We're giving these animals antibiotics and hormones, and then we're consuming low-dose antibiotics basically every time we eat, or 1 to 3 times a day, however it is, if you're not eating top-quality pasture-raised meats. And then we add this whole high fructose corn syrup from the 90s, genetically modified foods in the late 90s really became big business, and that's killing our good gut bacteria in droves and causing all kinds of issues. And then we add modern life, right? Stress. The more we secrete stress hormones, the more we get leaky gut, and it kills our good bacteria. And then what happens when we're stressed? We want alcohol or caffeine or refined carbs, which kind of exacerbate this and create the perfect storm.
Wow. Okay. You know your stuff. This is awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I just love this field.
Yeah, you do. Okay. So are there any particular diets? We have all these different types of diets. You have keto diet, vegan or vegetarian. Do any specific diets have a negative effect on our microbiome?
You know, I am all about the whole journey using food as medicine, and we all need to eat differently for different times of life.
Okay.
And so it depends on what's going on. It is difficult to really have strong, healthy, balanced hormones, especially adrenals and thyroid, if you're on a vegan diet. But the same thing, that's really hard if you're on a keto diet, because that's way too much of a long-term restriction. So I'm really about the balance. So I would say more of a paleo-ish diet would be something that would be really good for the microbiome, but don't skimp on the carbohydrates.
Something like a Mediterranean diet, possibly.
Yeah, a Mediterranean diet, and we're meant to have a full and varied diet, and that's going to be really important. But then, in our Gut Thrive program, of course, there's a specific diet for healing, because our primary goal is to first lower the inflammation set point. Like if you're going to go in and you're going to clean up the human body, you have to take the fuel off the fire before you can even start to put out the fire, right? So we take the fuel off the fire. We kind of cleansing and a calming and a healing diet. And then, we start to move in. It's just like a garden, I guess. I like that analogy. It's like, okay, we got to go in. We got to do the weeding. We got to just till it. We got to get things ready of what are we working on here? Right. Then we till the soil. Then we plant the seeds. Then we nurture the seeds. And then we have a beautiful new garden, which in this case is a new genetic code of the gut microbiome.
Awesome. Okay, so we know it's bad. What are some of the best things that we can do to improve our microbiome?
All right, some of the best things that you can do are eat healthy, right? Okay. So I really would love people to switch to a primarily organic diet. Especially look up the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15 if you don't eat all organic, and make sure you're buying those Dirty Dozen vegetables clean. Okay. Organic, and basically pasture-raised meats. That's going to be really important. So we're looking for 100% grass-fed and grass-finished beef. A lot of times you see grass-fed, but that's not really the most telling label, because maybe they were finished with grain. You don't know if they ate corn and soy.
They do that?
Yeah. So you eating a cow, if you eat a cow that's been only ate grass, completely different food than if you eat meat from a cow that ate grain and soy. It's a completely different interaction in your body. It's a completely different microbiome with every bite.
Totally aware of that. I just didn't realize that they can say grass-fed but finish it with grain.
Yeah. That's like the standard. So you have to really keep up on these labels, because a lot of them can be hype. And you're like, well, what does this really mean anymore? So that's something that's constantly changing.
That's so misleading.
It's misleading. I know there was an article last year. It bummed me out with Kerrygold butter because it says grass-fed on there, and then they saw that they were finishing with grain and soy.
Oh, okay. That's
so you want top quality meats. If you have a farmer's market, that's great. I love Butcher Box. They ship nationwide in the U.S. And if you're going to have grains, go gluten-free. So we are gluten-free. When you're healing the microbiome, we are gluten and dairy-free. I am not anti-dairy like most people in the paleo community. I'm about high-quality dairy, but most people with a compromised gut microbiome really shouldn't be having dairy. So you got to get dairy out. You got to get gluten out. Gluten is probably the main offender. You want to get out corn and soy, the 5 most common food sensitivities, and really start to eat more quality. So I'm talking about organic fruits and vegetables. If you have grains, soak them. If you're going to have brown rice or quinoa, soak them for 1 to 8 hours before you consume them, and go easy on the beans until you heal. And you're going to be having whole food carbohydrates like sweet potatoes and butternut squash, and those are okay. Even white potatoes are great. They have something called resistant starch that feed your good gut bacteria without feeding any bad gut bacteria. So I'm just really talking about a simple, pretty easy whole foods diet. And we use a lot of top quality bone broth in our Gut Thrive program, and we use spices that heal. And it doesn't have to be too hard, and it doesn't have to be too expensive.
Okay. So once we have a healthy microbiome, can we add things like dairy and gluten back into our diet?
Dairy, yes. If you so you also have to kind of work with the nervous system and work with the gut, and then you'll know, right? And so the best way I say, don't guess at it, test it. So there are antibody tests you can do to see if your body builds up antibodies to dairy or not. So for example, I'll give you myself as an example. This is kind of heartbreaking. I'm 100% Italian, but I have a food sensitivity to mozzarella cheese and Swiss cheese, and I've done a lot of gut healing, but all the other cheeses are fine. Right, and dairy, and I thrive, off of raw milk or goat's milk, things like that. So you have to tune in and listen to your own body and check it out. But I'd say 80% of people will be able to handle top quality dairy again, which can be so supportive for the nervous system and thyroid and adrenal balance. Gluten, I'm never going to be a fan of because what we've done to it in this country is frankenwheat. If you want to eat gluten over in Europe, awesome. Or like locally, Prager's bread, they use ancient wheat. They're using a starter. They're fermenting it. They're doing it the right way so that it's not causing leaky gut. But this modern industrialized wheat is crap. It is so bad for you. It is causing weight gain. It has 3 times the amount of starch called amylopectin that triggers the brain for addiction. So the modern wheat that we have mass produced just to make our food cheaper is not even really a food, and you should minimize it as much as possible. Because here's the thing. If you heal your gut, then you will be able to tolerate, I say bless it and eat it. I may go and have it every now and then, or when I go back to New Jersey, okay, I have to have this or that. Right? But if you do it consistently, then you've got to heal your gut again. Okay. So it's your choice, right? Knowing that you have to do that. And I'll run my tests maybe every 5 years and be like, do I need to do a gut program? Like, how much gluten can I get away with? Once or twice a month? That type of thing.
Okay. There's some breads like sprouted grain. I think Ezekiel is a brand, something bakery, Alvarado Bakery or whatever. Are those better or they still have the same problem?
They have the same problem because it's the integrity of the foundation. So... Well, my understanding is Ezekiel's not using the ancient wheat. They're sprouting the modern wheat. So while it's marginally better, it's not going to be something like our local Prager's, or you want to find people that it's really a craft of what they're doing and they understand.
Okay, and that's local here in San Diego. It's called Prager's?
Yeah, it's called Prager Brothers.
Prager
Prager Brothers. Yeah.
I'll have to check it out. Awesome.
Yeah, you'll love it.
Okay, so we've established that a poor microbiome can have a negative effect on our health. And in my research, I found some of the conditions to be rather surprising. So I'm going to go through a few examples. And those are, it can affect allergies, it can affect our immune system, it can affect obesity and diabetes, it can increase or decrease inflammation in the body, and they may even influence mental health with possible links to autism and depression. So what is it about, a poor microbiome that causes all of the negative health effects? And I've heard you mention leaky gut in the past. Is leaky gut the reason, or is something else causing this problem?
I'm going to answer that by saying that Hippocrates, the father of natural medicine, he said, this is like thousands of years ago, he said, all disease begins in the gut. And so if the gut is the foundation of human health, the gut microbiome isn't giving the proper direction to the immune system, of course we're going to have allergies. Of course we're going to have a higher propensity for autoimmune disease, obesity, diabetes, and just body-wide inflammation. And what's happened is mental health too. We have lost the gut-brain connection via this one nerve that connects them called the vagal nerve. And so leaky gut is a byproduct of a poor microbiome. So just like the whole war analogy, so when we kill off the good gut bacteria that are acting like they're like okay, I'm going with this analogy, right? So we have, in terms of bacteria, the good bacteria, we have bacteria that are like soldiers, right? With their boots on the ground, something bad comes in, it's their job to escort them out and then go to maybe show them to the immune system. Like you think about that, a bad soldier, show them to the immune system, say, hey, in the future we want to recognize this so we get it out, but I'll take it out now, right?
Okay.
And then you have the colonizing type of bacteria. They're like the Army Corps of Engineers. They're going to go and rebuild the brick lining. So if you think of leaky gut like a brick wall, the mortar's missing. And everything that escapes the gut, Chris, goes directly to the brain. Now, all of a sudden, right, this is not supposed to escape. So we don't have we lost the Army Corps of Engineers. Like it's a complete free-for-all in there. And then we have another type of bacteria that we've also killed off, and that's the bacillus type of bacteria. And I relate them to, Army Rangers or Navy SEALs. These guys, they are your front lines, and they do not seek to ever be comfortable. They can live with and without air, and they're going to do the hardest, sneakiest fighting for you. So through our diet, through stress, through lifestyle, through all that, we've killed off all three of these good guys. Well, whatever your genetic propensity is, your allergies, immune system, diabetes, right? However, inflammation is going to manifest in your unique body is going to create dis-ease or multiple diseases. And I want to speak to the obesity, if I can, and diabetes.
This is how we got on the topic, actually, in our last podcast. So please do.
Oh, you got on. Okay. It's just so fascinating because, you have these people that they're not even eating that much and they're exercising and they're gaining weight. Yeah. It's like people who feel like, if I just smell the donut down the street, I'm going to gain 5 pounds. Like, what is up with that, right? And then you have people, or they can extract calories from a lettuce leaf, and then you have other people eating the same exact thing, and they're not gaining weight. And then the same goes for diabetes and insulin resistance. It's like, what is my body doing? Right. So there's two primary phylums of bacteria. There's the Bacteroides, which should be in control. And then there's this sugar-producing bacteria called Firmicutes. And the Bacteroides keeps Firmicutes in check. The power balance, it's like a hostile takeover, right? If we're talking about war, the power balance gets flipped. Firmicutes takes over, and now you're extracting calories out of a lettuce leaf. And so it's so important, the microbiome, and I have to throw in a Canadian study since you're from Canada.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, it's really one of my favorite studies about this, that they took two twins, and one twin, this was a female set of twins in their 30s, one was lean, one was obese. And this was a microbiome study. So they did fecal implants. They took part of their microbiome, right? Of these two women, and they implanted it into rats whose digestive systems were essentially a complete blank slate. And they fed these rats the same diet, the same environment. Within several months, one rat was lean, the other rat was obese. So if that tells you anything, like the microbiome really does drive your weight and how you process calories. And that's why we can't disconnect our gut from our hormones, because this is driving our metabolic process. So it's affecting the thyroid, it's affecting the adrenals and all the other sex hormones, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone. So you got to look at the gut.
Wow. Do you think in the future this will be a treatment for obesity?
Yeah, I think it's already becoming a treatment for obesity. And, in the mainstream medicine, you got to give them credit because they're doing for a lot of different diseases now. They're doing, and so you could go through our Gut Thrive in 5 program and do it through the diet and the herbs and the supplements and the lifestyle techniques, or the mainstream medical way is to do a fecal implant. So they may take, the same thing and try to develop a new microbiome there.
So you're saying that we're going to get into your program in a minute, but you're saying that with your program, you can reestablish this balance and help people with obesity as well.
Oh, 1,000%. I mean, we've done it so many times, hundreds of times with people with obesity, people with multiple autoimmune disorders and Crohn's and colitis, and they're coming to us, after maybe 40 doctors and several surgeries and $100,000 spent, and really about ready to give up, but you can't give up because this is your health. And then this process gives them back their life.
Wow. Okay. So this is becoming obvious. Mike, you're answering my questions as we go. This is great. So, I've heard you say that the microbiome is the new model for long-term healing. And what I'm hearing is that if our microbiome is unbalanced and the Army Corps of Engineers isn't doing their job and the Navy SEALs aren't doing their job, that our body is really, it's not functioning properly. So
you can't plant flowers in a junkyard,
Exactly. So you're saying it's the new model for long-term healing, and you're saying by reestablishing this gut microbiome, it really gives us a good foundation from which to, have a healthy start, if you will. Is that true?
Absolutely. Have a healthy life. So you create a foundation from which all other health can spring from.
Okay. What is the best way for us to test or assess the current health of our microbiome?
So there's 3 ways. Well, I'll just say 2 ways.
Okay.
You can do a microbiome test. There's 2 companies out there that are reputable right now. It's called Ubiome and Viome, and I believe anyone can order them. You don't need to be a clinician, and you collect your stool for a couple of days and you send it in, you see what's going on. You might need someone to help you interpret it. The other thing is, and I've run so many of these in my practice, is you could run a pathogen test. And I like BioHealth Diagnostics for that. My favorite test of theirs is the 401H, and that is a multi-spectrum pathogen test. So you can't just look at bacteria. You also have protozoa, parasites, the eggs of those bad guys, which different types of bacteria, E. coli. You got to look at candida and yeast and fungal infections and something called H. pylori. So you want to look at the full manner of bad guys that are in there, but it's expensive, Chris, and this is why I created Gut Thrive in 5 all the way back in 2014, because I wanted people to find a way to get to the genetic root cause pathogen. So when you're going to run these lab work, you may come back, let's say, with candida. But nobody has just one because we have so many there. So then people, they come to me after years of trying to beat candida and they still don't feel well. Well, hey, we ran before and after lab work for 2 years before developing this algorithmic questionnaire to determine the root cause pathogen. So for example, that person that came to me, well, they had H. pylori and their body was producing candida to keep them safe from the H. pylori. So you kept removing the thing that was supposed to keep them safe, and then they got worse, right?
Yeah.
And so you've got to get to the root cause pathogen, and we address the entire microbiome, all the bugs, good, bad, and indifferent, and all the different types of pathogens, but finding that root cause, whether it's parasites or protozoa. Many people, I'm sure you've heard of SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. That's a lower GI issue, or many people have an upper GI issue, which is H. pylori in their stomach and esophagus. Those are the folks with acid reflux and almost ulcers and burning pain. They can't handle a lot of foods. SIBO people are walking around like they're 6 months pregnant and they can't handle a lot of foods in a different way. And then you've got yeast, candida, fungal infection. That's typically from antibiotic overuse. That was how I got into this whole field. And so we will have them do this 180 algorithmic questionnaire with 4 variations of frequency and severity, and we determine the root cause pathogen, so we know exactly how to tailor not just the diet, but the herbs and the supplements and the lifestyle strategies to truly rebalance in a customized way.
Wow, that's brilliant. Okay, so you built this algorithm that allowed, based on the questions, you have a really good understanding of what's going on inside someone's microbiome.
Oh, yeah, and we've tested it, We've tested it with hundreds of people along with lab work, and it's fascinating to see where the lab work, because you got to treat the person. You can't treat the lab work. And we'll see, these 2 pathogens came back.
Crazy.
It's
okay.
Fascinating.
So we need a well-balanced distribution of bacteria in our gut to be healthy. We've established that now. And I've heard you talk about there are 3 types of bugs. And I think you mentioned that briefly in the beginning of the show, but it's really crucial to keep those 3 bugs balanced. Can you talk maybe in a little more detail about those 3 types of bugs and what they're doing when they're in balance versus when they're out of balance?
Yeah, well, we covered those. So you've got the symbiotic.
Okay, same thing.
Symbiotic, yeah, and pathogenic, and then commensal.
Okay.
So those are your 3 types, but I'm looking forward to getting to the 5 steps because it's the order in which you do this that is everything, because there's so many people that don't get better because they don't do it in the right order. They're just testing this out here and that out there.
Okay. So your system, you have 5 steps to rejuvenating the microbiome and the immune system. So can you talk about what those are?
Oh, I would love to. Okay. So the first step, right? Because this really brings it into focus for all of your listeners. The first step, you have to reduce inflammation, right? We're not going to get anywhere if you don't. And so step 1 is to really go in and do some proper cleanup work and take the fuel off the fire. So we remove the foods that aren't working for you. We start to add in anti-inflammatory things like turmeric ginger lemonade. I'll give you that example. Cumin, coriander, and fennel tea. We're doing some castor oil packs to support the liver so the liver can handle the release of these. And we're using something called proteolytic enzymes, which eat up foreign proteins in the body and process them out through the bowels. It's like the first cleaning crew. If you've ever had a cleaning lady and you clean up before the cleaning lady so she can actually do her job, right? Yes. That's what I'm talking about here.
Okay, that round. Yep.
Yeah, that resonates, right? So that's going to be really important. That's our step 1. And then step 2 is to purge the pathogens, because now we know what we're dealing with. We can actually go in and clean it up. And I know you want to ask me this a little bit later, but I've got to talk about quorum sensing now, if that's okay.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so I found that we're all dealing with stress. We're all dealing with a number of things. And the sicker people are, the less they can cleanse and detox, which is why nobody was getting better. Even when they go to naturopaths, even when they start using herbs, all kinds of things. So what we realized is we have to be gentle. Just like antibiotics go in and throw a bomb into open warfare, you can do the same thing with high-dose botanicals. Just because they're natural doesn't make them benign. So we studied the way bacteria communicate, the way all these pathogens communicate, and they communicate through like a very intricate cell phone system, if you will, called quorum sensing. And so what we did is we figured out how to use a wide array of herbs for all different types of pathogens that I mentioned, protozoa, viruses, heavy metals, bacteria, you name it. We are going under the threshold with these herbs specific to your gut problem, and we are interrupting quorum sensing. It is the gentlest approach. So we basically cut the cell phone towers. Now, these pathogens can no longer communicate. And if they can't communicate, they can't replicate and share their genetic code. So the more we eat healthy, the more we're changing things, the more we're creating this environment, the more we heal leaky gut and add good guys back in, the more these pathogens are going to leave more gently on their own instead of us like dragging them out. So if you think about having a party and you want everybody to leave, well, is it going to be messier if like you call the cops and pull them out of there? Or is it going to be easier if you just kind of like turn off the music, take away the refreshments, right? It's gentler. And so that's what we want to do. So they're not, because the harsher you do it, the more they feel assaulted, the more metabolic waste they secrete, which is more toxins for your liver and kidneys to handle, which is why people go into what's called Herxheimer's response, where it's like a 10-car pileup on the freeway, and that they're trying to get rid of these pathogens, but you don't have enough lanes to get them out. So this allows us to pace it and not put a burden on the liver and the kidneys that it already can't handle because we're already not, in the best of health. But now instead, we're slowly and gently purging these pathogens, and they're not completely all out at the end of step 2, which is a month-long process, because we're changed the direction in step 3. Now it's finally time, right? Back to the garden analogy. We've done all the weeding, but we have to reseed. And so whatever weeds are really tough to get out, we're going to let the new seeds get them out.
Okay.
And this is where most people make a mistake. They think that probiotics, hey, they inform like so much of human health. You can't just throw probiotics like willy-nilly down the chute and think you're going to get healthier. You don't know what you're feeding, what you're not. So you need to be very careful with your use of probiotics to make sure that they're actually going to be beneficial and do what you need and want them to do. So we use many different strains of probiotics in the gut at this point, but we use them like a starter log, if you will, just to kind of replant them and catch the fire. And this is how it's so important. Back to your original question of, do we all have, a microbiome that's as different as our fingerprints? Well, yeah, based upon where we're originally from, Asia, Africa, North America, you could have 400 to 500 different types of bacterial species that are inherent to your gut microbiome that science or natural medicine can never recreate for you to take in a pill. So we'll use all these different strains I talked about to like a starter log, and then your own body, we give the direction to your own body to make those 400 or 500 strains whatever it needs to thrive. This is why it's so customized, and it starts to make it from the food you eat. Like you and I can eat the same meal, we'll make completely different bacteria out of that same meal. And then the water that you drink, the air that you breathe, the environment, your thoughts are so important. Your emotional state is so important in microbiome development, influencing the bacteria. So that's kind of where we change the strategy and we let the good guys and the inherent healing system of the human body take over. And then step 4, we call it the HCl challenge and terraforming, because every year over age 30, we produce less and less hydrochloric acid, which is very important. Stomach acid, enough stomach acid. There's my clinical partner in the program, he says, good fences make good neighbors. And that is true. And so you need hydrochloric acid to build a fence to protect you from reinfection, to protect you from re-triggering leaky gut, right? We're in step 3, we're healing and sealing the gut as long with these pathogens as well. And now you need to produce optimal stomach acid, not only just to prevent reinfection, but to be able to think straight. You need stomach acid to use vitamin B12, responsible for cognitive function and memory. And that's why a lot of people, they have gut problems. Well, hey, they can't think straight, their memory is going, and they just don't feel energetic because they may be eating foods high in B vitamins, but they're not digesting and absorbing them.
Okay.
And so then we do something, this comes from Star Trek. We do something in step 4 called terraforming. And that's the idea of if you build it, they will come. We are building a new land, and the seeds have been planted. The gut is on its way for healing, but you're not going to have a garden overnight, just like you're not going to have a new genetic code of your gut overnight. Now it's finally healthy to add in foods that have prebiotics, and prebiotics are food for your good gut bacteria. So instead of constantly giving good gut bacteria, let's start to eat the foods that will allow that good gut bacteria to grow, and to grow in the way it needs to grow for your specific health.
Okay. And how long does this process take?
It's an 11-week program.
Oh, that's
and
not
then
bad.
step 5 is 80-20 maintenance. So then we really teach you the flow of a clean, healthy living, and how to live an 80-20 balance, because you want to add back the foods that are fun. You want to feel like, you have a full and varied diet and you're not obsessing about your health, but you have to work with your body at the pace that it's ready to do that. So that's what we teach. Yeah.
So one of the common problems that medicine has, I think, with treating microbiome is because everyone has this very unique, distinct microbiome. You said you and I could eat the same meal and it would create different bacteria. So medicine's like, well, we can treat one person, but the effect it has on that person is completely different than another person. So with your system, is it the algorithm and the questionnaire that you're starting with? Are you altering the treatment for different individuals based on what the algorithm says, or is your method just general enough, if you will, that it covers all the bases?
It's both general and customized.
Okay, so you're customizing.
Yeah, we're customized because you come in and you take this algorithmic questionnaire and you get put in one of 4 buckets, so to speak, right?
Right.
You're going to be in SIBO, the plan S, or plan H for H. pylori, or P for parasites and protozoa, or F for fungal. But each plan covers also everything, parasites, they all cover each other. Just focus on one. But then we teach you how to customize, because I have a whole clinical team that people are writing into every step to help them customize, because some people, based upon their history, I'm seeing your question here about something like C. diff, and so you may have to go at half the dose and the program might have to be longer for you. Or there's certain, we give our customers everything, but there might be certain cleansing techniques that are better, some that are worse. And so we help you customize along the way based upon your body and your health history.
I've had C. diff actually, which is why.
Oh, that's why you picked that one. Yeah, it can be so scary and life-threatening. I'm sorry you went through that.
Yeah. Okay, so with this becoming more and more mainstream, there are so many products on the market. There's probiotics, there's prebiotics, there's synbiotics, there's yogurt and kombucha and all of these things.
Yeah.
Do you think those are good for us in general, or we really need to take this holistic approach to kind of reset and then go from there? Or is like, if we're just eating this stuff, but we haven't done the groundwork to reestablish a good, healthy microbiome, could these things actually be hurting us?
They could be, yeah. So kombucha, for example, you mentioned that. It's everywhere now.
Right.
That is awful. Fermented foods are really bad if you have candida or yeast overgrowth because they're going to feed it. And if you feel kind of like silly or giddy or even like slightly, drunk, like after having some kombucha, hey, that's feeding that. And so that kind of goes back to the steps I mentioned. Like, there really is not a human being that can't benefit from going through this process. But the plight of the human condition is we are so busy, and until we get stopped, until our health stops us in a serious way, that's when we go looking for it, because we don't have anything if we don't have our health. So I would love it if people would start to do this in a more proactive way as a way to prevent all manner of future diseases and disorders and symptoms. So yes, everybody can benefit from this in varying degrees. It's like just like you change the oil in your car, it'll run better. And so especially like athletes, this could really help them increase performance and just how they feel and maintain their hormonal structure as they age and keep their inflammation down. So I'm never gonna disparage like a healthy lifestyle and the benefit. So, even if you just start to clean up your diet, hey, you're positively affecting every single bite. But yeah, should you be just randomly throwing this probiotic or that probiotic down or this food because you heard it was good on the news? Well, is it good or is it good for you?
Right. Okay. So one of the other things that people talk a lot about is the over-sanitization of things, hand sanitizers. And I read in, I think it was Justin Sonnenberg's book, that dogs are rumored to improve our microbiome. I know you have a dog. I have a dog. That's how we met, actually. So the benefit is dogs is they're good for more than one reason now. But can you talk a little bit about the over-sanitization of things and what is too much and what is just right?
Well, that goes back to when I said we're more bacterial than we are human. Like, we're never going to win this thing.
Okay, yeah.
The only way we're going to win this thing is to create harmony with the bacteria and the human cells. And what we've tried to do is just separate these two worlds completely, which is impossible. So pasteurization, like you said, hand sanitizer, never exposing to germs. Well, if you're never going to, it's like never showing the immune system a challenge. And if you don't lift weights, you're not going to be able to lift heavy things, right?
Right.
That's the idea of all this that we're doing here with the over sanitization. Like, kids should play in the dirt. They should and let their body figure out, what's good, what's bad in this developing immune system.
Okay, so we've talked about having an unbalanced microbiome. We've also talked about having an infection or a disease in your microbiome. Is treating a diseased versus a simply unbalanced microbiome much different, or is it relatively similar? You're just going to tweak some of your inputs based on the algorithm?
Yeah, we're going to tweak the inputs based on the algorithm, and the pace changes, and the length of time to healing changes. If you're diseased, you're gonna need to be working at this. So if you think about as long as you've dealt with something, however many years, with our process, you need a month of healing, and then you cut that in half. So, hey, if you're coming and you're relatively healthy and just want to do a rejuvenation, you got this. In 11 weeks, you got basically a new microbiome and a new directive that your body can then take on and keep building on. But if you've been really sick for a really long time, you have to have patience with your body. You're probably going to take the program at half the pace and let your body tell you what you can handle and what you can't. And, it might take double the amount of time.
Okay. So I brought up C. diff because I've had that disease, and that can be life-threatening. It's typically for an older population, but it can be. So I want to ask your advice on when should we seek medical attention? Like sometimes, and I know you're not, I don't think you're a doctor, but, I'm not asking you to give medical advice, but in your experience, is there a point where we should say, hey, I should go see a doctor instead of, trying a cleanse or more?
Of course. The more acute the symptoms, the more you need medical attention, right?
Okay.
So if
Okay.
you've got C. diff, and you've got a serious case of diarrhea, and you're losing your electrolytes and balance, and you can't digest your food, you're gonna
to the
need
doctor.
medical intervention, right? I'm sure you went
Yeah.
through fever and nausea and abdominal pain and all of that. So you're gonna need, and I'm not against Western medicine anyway. You're gonna need them to get you stabilized before you do something like this.
Okay.
We're not medical doctors. We're a team of clinical and integrative nutritionists. And so you can't be in an acute situation and start a program like this.
Perfect. Okay. And what do you think the future holds for this area of science, if you will?
Oh, I think it's incredible. I mean, this is really coming into the mainstream. I don't know if you checked it out, but we do a gut health report. I have a show called Food as Medicine TV, and we do a gut health report every year. And just, last year there were 4,000 peer-reviewed published papers on the gut microbiome. So we're recognizing it. It's moving into the mainstream. Not yet are they talking about like a process that I just went through to actually heal it, but they're really understanding how it's working and making leaps and bounds. So,
Okay, very cool. Now I'm going to ask you a few questions about athletes in particular, and I know that athletes may not be your most popular crowd to work with, but you may be able to shed some light on how this could relate to athletes. So, you've mentioned inflammation a few times, and a lot of we have cyclists that listen to our show and triathletes, and we do a lot of repetitive motions, and overuse injuries are common, and those are typically inflammation in tendons or ligaments. So can a general approach, a better microbiome help with inflammation in that regard as well?
Yes, in an indirect way. It's not going to be everything, obviously, because you're actually putting, structural, physical tension on your body. But what it can do is it can help. It can help with better synovial fluid around the joints, which lubricates the joints. It can help give, with a stronger liver, stronger kidneys, a stronger gut, and then your body's not dealing with inflammation, so previous weak points are not as weak as they once were.
Okay, perfect. And I guess if you have a lower overall state of inflammation in the body, you're kind of starting at a lower level of inflammation before you build to what could potentially be an injury, right?
Correct.
Kind of have a bigger buffer in there.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
A friend of ours who's actually been on the show, his name's Nate Pearson. He's the owner at Trainer Road. He's had chronic sinus infections over and over and over, and he put up a post on his forum a while ago saying, how can he fix this? Because he's tried antibiotics over and over and over again.
No,
and you mentioned sinuses at the beginning of this show. So for his sake, I'm asking, are chronic sinus infections something that could be treated with what you're doing?
Yes. Tell him about this, Chris, because so that's the thing. When you reset the genetic code of the gut microbiome, then it goes and it communicates to the sinuses. Hey, it's like civil engineer. It's like having the best civil engineer in the world, because it's like, all right, well, I did this in the gut. Let me go up here to the sinuses, and you go to another city and say, here's what worked here. So this is probably what you should do here to stop these chronic sinus infections.
All right. Well, Nate, buddy, you heard it here, man. You gotta go check out this.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the last question I'm going to ask you before we get into your website and what you're doing is, we call this our Watt point question. And like I said, I know you're not a cyclist, but
I know, I don't even know what that means.
Yeah. So with cycling, we measure our resistance, basically how strong you're riding based on watts. Okay. So if like a really, really good cyclist in the Tour de France may be able to hold 400 or 450 watts for an hour, and then your general run-of-the-mill cyclist could probably hold 250, right? So it's a measure of how strong you can pedal. So what we do is, every time we do one of these podcasts, we ask the expert, if the listener takes the advice of the expert, how many watts is that worth? So we're going to take somebody in this case, and I'm going to say that they have really poor gut health. They've maybe got some chronic sinus infections. Their body's not digesting food properly. If you were to take them through a full system and get them back to a healthy, balanced microbiome, let's just use percentage. What percent improvement in performance would you get? This could be a random guess, but what percent improvement would an athlete potentially see from establishing a healthy gut microbiome?
50 to 75% improvement. I mean, you could feasibly take somebody at 250 watt points, go through this program, add a few extra carbs than we put on our program, and they can hit 450 watts.
Okay. Yeah. So if you're in a really bad state of health, you can double what you're doing. Okay.
Absolutely. Of course. Yeah.
And then if let's say you're not in a really bad state of health, you're just like the general run of the mill. We're talking maybe more like 10% or 15% improvement.
Yeah, 20%.
Okay, perfect. Okay, well, that's such a good thing. All right, so now we got to ask where people can. This is fascinating stuff, and you're brilliant, by the way. This has been a very enjoyable episode for me. We touched on this topic, like I said, about a year ago, and I've learned so much more just talking to you today. So, where can people learn more about you and what you do?
If this is interesting, you can go to Gut Thrive and 5, the number 5, gutthriveand5.com, and it lays out everything I just went over, and there's all the details about our program, and there's also a free webinar that goes into further steps of these, like what's a day in your life like going through these 5 steps. So people like to watch that.
Okay, and you also, I believe, own Whole Journey. Is that correct?
Yeah, the Whole Journey is my parent company, and then we have all of these different programs that go with that. And
can people get to Gut Thrive and 5 from the Whole Journey?
Yep, you can find it from thewholejourney.com. Direct is gutthriveand5.com, but they're all housed on the same website. And I think we chatted at the park, so I've got a show, and it's completely free, and I cover basically every aspect of health. So
yeah,
if there's anything that you're interested in, then you can find it there.
Okay, and you've also authored a book or books? Which books have you written?
I've written 4 books.
Wow.
2 cookbooks and 1 Healthy Life handbook. And then if the fertility, prenatal, and postnatal stuff is interesting to you, that's a book called How to Conceive Naturally and Have a Healthy Pregnancy After 30. And it takes this 5-trimester approach to pregnancy in mind, with the first being preconception, before you conceive, and the last being postpartum. And we talk about what to eat in every week of pregnancy based upon what organs and glands of the fetus are forming to help them form to their best ability, but also by consistently nurturing mom so she doesn't have a ton of exhaustion or cleanup work to do after the pregnancy, because the baby takes what the baby needs, and often it takes mom a lot longer to get balanced if she's not eating to create a super baby and a super mom.
Well, I might have to read that. My wife just turned 30, and we are trying to have a child. So
yeah. If you send me your address, I'd love to send it to you. I'll send it to you.
Awesome.
Okay,
and
good.
then,
Congratulations on your marriage too. You're engaged when we met.
Yes, and we've now been married since. So yeah.
Awesome.
And then you said you've taken more than 10,000 people through this program.
Well, yeah. Well, I don't know if we're at 10,000 now. I'm going to say it's probably somewhere like 8,000. We also have a Candida program, so a Kit Candida for Good. And so when you combine that, we're far over. In all of our programs, we've taken 25,000 people through.
Brilliant. Amazing. Okay, well, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to talk to us today. This is fascinating. People have been asking about this topic, and it is hard to find an expert, and you are, without a doubt, an expert on this topic. So thank you so much for coming on, and I hope we can send some people your way to get you closer to 10,000.
Oh, thanks, Chris. It's a pleasure. Thanks for letting me talk about my passion.
Yeah, have a great day. Hey, this is Chris with FLO. When we're not producing this podcast, our team at FLO is designing some of the fastest carbon fiber bicycle wheels in the world. As a thank you for being a listener of our podcast, Faster by FLO, we wanted to offer you 20% off your next purchase of wheels at flowcycling.com. Head over to our website and pick up a set of wheels to make you faster at your next race or ride. Simply use coupon code PODCAST, that's PODCAST, in all uppercase letters when checking out to get 20% off your order. Thanks again for listening to Faster. We hope you enjoy the show. Thank you for listening to this episode. As I mentioned at the top of the show, after dedicating my full time to flow cycling for the better part of a decade, I've decided to move on from the day-to-day responsibilities. John will be running this podcast from now on, and while he gets ready to release some very new, exciting products, this show will take a short break. We'll be back with new great content as soon as possible. If you enjoy the show, please help us by sharing our podcast and by leaving a rating or review. If you want to learn more about our company, FLO Cycling, please visit us online at flowcycling.com. That's F as in Frank, LOCYCLING.com. You can also find us under FLO Cycling on Facebook and Instagram. Until next time, ride safe.